Welcome back to Approps 101. Today we're going to be talking about one of the bills under the 12 bills that fund the appropriations, the discretionary part of the budget. We have with us a very distinguished fellow. He is in fact the Dean of the House. That means the longest serving member of the House of Representatives. Good friend of mine from Kentucky, Hal Rogers. He's chaired many of these subcommittees, been on the Appropriations Committee for a long time, and today he's chairing the Commerce, Justice, and Science bill. He was our full committee chairman until on the Republican side, we term limit the individuals. They can only be there for 6 years. And he was our full committee chairman for 6 years and then took over at CJS. So he's done a fantastic job. And another thing is when we revamped our budget and how we do it and the administration, we created the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11. Hal was the chair of that committee when it was first formed. So he was in charge of an awful lot of very important agencies that were brought together and put in the Department of Homeland Security. Did a fantastic job as a chairman of that and putting together that committee. And as I said, a very good friend of mine. We've done a lot together and I've learned a lot from him. So Hal, welcome and thank you for coming and visiting us today.
Chairman, thank you very much. This is a great idea that you have to explain the committee.
Well, you know, it's when people started asking me, why aren't you guys doing anything about the debt and deficit, you know? And I would say, well, what do you want us to do? And they would say, quit spending money. And then I'd say, okay, where do you want me to quit spending it? And that people would pause. Well, if you quit funding farmers, would probably balance the budget in the year, you know. People don't really understand the federal budget, that 70% of it is mandatory spending. In fact, I think it's 72%. What we fund is the discretionary part of the budget, which is typically everything you think of as government. Whether it's the land management agencies or the federal prison system or the FBI and CIA and all those other things. Those are funded in discretionary spending.
Yeah. And people don't understand what mandatory spending is.
Yeah.
It's spending that's automatic.
Yeah.
It's a law that Congress passed sometime back in the future. And it requires that we spend X number of dollars on Social Security,
Yeah.
for example. Well, the Congress has not reached a level of comfort in talking about cutting spending like Social Security,
Yeah.
Medicare, Medicaid, and so on.
Yeah.
But those are mandatory spendings.
Well, I've always found it interesting, and our chairman now, Tom Cole, has this chart where for 10 years, from 2008 to 2018, discretionary spending was flat. I mean, not flat with adjusted for inflation, but flat for 10 years. Revenue to the government kept going up, but our deficit kept going up more because of the increases in mandatory spending. So ultimately, I thought it was a good idea that if we're gonna really have the courage to address a lot of these issues that we need to educate the public, or they need to be educated to exactly how the appropriations process works.
Yeah.
And what we actually fund and what mandatory funding is. So we're going to do some videos on that anyway, but let's talk about CJS today. What exactly do you fund in Commerce, Justice, Science appropriation bill?
It's a whole passel of agencies. For example, the Justice Department, FBI, ATF, for example,
Mm-hmm.
And Commerce Department, any number of the agencies that the government has that deal with international trade, for example,
Mm-hmm.
is covered in the bill. And it also covers all science spending that we do, which is substantial.
Yeah.
And it also includes money that funds EDA, which is an organization that funds economic development
Yeah.
projects of members. The bill also covers NASA, our nation's space exploration
Yeah.
agencies. That's just a sample of the pieces of the budget.
And I suspect that NASA part of the budget is going to continue to go up as we're planning on putting another man on the moon, from what I understand, and of course everybody's talking about going to Mars and that type of thing. So, and actually, those programs have been obviously very important to this country and actually our economic development and our science and technology and stuff. So, NASA is an important part of it. But man, you cover the federal prisons and everything else, don't you?
Sure.
And,
yeah, prisons. All law enforcement agencies, by and large, are funded in this bill.
Anyway, it's a very interesting bill, and as I said, it's 4.6% of the discretionary budget, which is 28% of the overall budget. So it's only 1.1% of overall spending. Right. So as I've tried to explain to people, a lot of these things you can do away with discretionary spending completely. Get rid of every agency and everything. Some people may like that, but you can do away with all of it. You still have a budget deficit.
Yeah.
So
still in the red.
It's going to take some courage from Congress to stand up and try to address some of the changes that are going to be necessary to get us toward a balanced budget.
But to illustrate the attitude of the Congress toward entitlements, mandatory spending, when I first came to Congress in 1981 with Reagan, mandatory spending was 55% of the budget, plus interest.
Yeah.
Now, it's 72%.
Right.
And rising.
Yep.
So until we tackle mandatory spending, you will not come near a balanced budget.
Yeah. And people out there that it's like Social Security, I tell people all the time, we're not talking about cutting your Social Security or even reducing it if you are nearing the age of retirement and stuff. But we've got to change it because, I've seen polls where if you ask a young person today, they will say that they believe they're more likely to see an alien in their lifetime than they are to get Social Security. And when Social Security started, there were 16 and a half workers for every retiree. And the average lifespan was 64. Now there are 2.5 workers for every retiree. That means not as many people paying in per retiree. And the average lifespan is what, 78, 80, something like that?
Yeah.
So it's just a system that doesn't pencil out anymore. We've got to have the courage to take it on and not put the fear of God into the American people that we're trying to take away their Social Security. Nobody is. We're trying to make it last.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention too in my bill is the fight against fentanyl.
Oh, yeah.
And the drug war.
Yep.
Huge amount of spending, but it's making a difference. They've seized so many tons of fentanyl a year.
Yeah.
And the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, and the bill, we've beefed up because they're doing a good job of going after the cartel heads, arresting them in Mexico and bringing them back to justice in the U.S. That's part of the fight. I started an organization in my district called Unite, Unlawful Narcotics Treatment, Education, and the like. And we have chapters of that organization in every county. I've got 33 counties. And now we've taken it national. We have a national summit for opioid abuse, including fentanyl. We have it in Atlanta, and then next year in Nashville. We'll have 4,000 people there from every avenue you can think of, dealing with opioid deaths and abuse, especially fentanyl.
Yeah.
The president comes always to that summit, along with Attorney General, members of the House and Senate, nurses, anybody having anything to do with the problem comes to that summit. Been very effective, and we're now seeing, thank God, a slight decrease in the number of deaths.
Yeah.
So that's a part of this bill as well.
Well, I should have said this when I introduced you, that there's probably been no stronger fighter against opioids, Oxycontin, all that kind of stuff in his district, because it was one of the most heavily impacted districts and states with the Oxycontin and stuff like that. And Hal he's an attorney by trade, and he has been probably the number one fighter in Congress to make sure we get the resources to fight that.
All I want to be is the Paul Revere of opioid.
Well, we'll have to put that on a room for you. Anyway, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's always nice, and I hope if any of you have any questions about any of the other appropriation bills and any suggestions, please let us know. But let your friends and neighbors know about these videos so that they can learn a little bit about how Congress works and what the appropriations process is. We're going to go into, as we proceed down this path, into what mandatory spending is, how it's there, how it changes. We talked about that a little today, and what discretionary spending is, and some of the ideas that are out there on some of these things. So we're going to continue the program, so I appreciate it very much, and thanks for being with us today.